Hey guys, the programs were hidden behind the door, so if you line up from one side, you may not see
Westminster Park College. It's not there. It wasn't in New Jersey. And often, like if New York Film was doing Recital, and so I got to go to a lot of times and do that sort of thing. Loved it, of course, but I love visiting. Like, I'm not
anyone else do programs?
downtown Manhattan. So in the country, the way you do it sounds beginning of August, from Champaign, Urbana, I was finishing my doctorate at I'm still working on it. It's on a Brazilian composer called Handel. So, late wrote in the classical from Brazil, but it was still a Portuguese. Yes. So it sounds pretty like it's not as ornate as this. No one had written a dissertation about this guy yet? Yes. Yeah, and of course,
All right, well, we're waiting for a couple more people to arrive. Cellist who's lost in the music building somewhere. No one left breadcrumbs. If you could turn to the back of the program, this is the full schedule for tomorrow. A reminder for those doing the Dvorak Largo that there's another chance to rehearse right away at 9 in the morning. There'll only be two chances probably to read, but I think it's meant to go well, so wonderful. And welcome to everyone that's traveled from the state. The reading session from 9:30 to 10, you do not have to play an instrument. You can come and sing. We have a spiritual and a couple of famous chorale tunes. You'll notice in tonight's program that the chorale becomes like a central feature of what we're talking about, but really the topic is language and song and the influence that song has on all of us, and certainly on instrumental compositions, but on culture. So tomorrow morning, just for 40 minutes, bring your instrument, bring your voice. We'll read Old Hundredth, becomes the Lutheran doxology. We'll look at Going Home, the famous melody from the Dvorak's New World Symphony, and others. It's just a kind of community music making, celebrating what we're talking about tonight. The master classes will be in here, and if you do not know what a master class is or haven't been to one, it's like a private lesson in front of a room full of people. So you get to see Mr. Hanani work with students on their music, and it's a really, I think, an inspiring opportunity to enrich your understanding of literature that you may have played or may not play. Master classes are a great chance to learn from in more of a studio setting, and Mr. Hanani is fantastic in this setting. He's really great. At 2 o'clock, right in here, I'll be covering music inspired by song. And I'm very excited to be joined by my colleagues, Deborah Bowles and Megan Kramer. Where's Megan? Yeah, right there, right in front of me. And we're going to, and many of you may not know, but Dvorak's Cello Concerto, he was homesick at the time, and there is a love from the distant past, and a song that connected the two of them is used as thematic material. We're going to hear the song and talk about the connection and really unpack that. It will be fantastic. At 3 o'clock, another master class. And then 6:30, our final concert. I'm calling it a collaborative concert. And this is less a, well, I won't say what it's less, I'll say what it is. It's a chance for us to make music together, from far and wide, and celebrate song, its influence on music in one final way. So it will be a diverse group of performers. We're inviting basically everyone who participated in the weekend to the stage, and I think it'll be very exciting. Okay, so the first thing, I think I've killed enough time that I can close the doors. Oh, no, I didn't. It's exactly right. Jon, would you give a very brief introduction of the piece you guys want to come up with?
Good evening. My name is Jon Swedberg. I'm the Director of Choral Activities here at Minot State. And when Erik talked to me about this weekend, he asked me if I could find a piece for tenor and small ensemble that just talked about how music works. And so I just Googled Baroque cantatas for tenor, and I found one by George Frederick Handel called Look Down, Harmonious Saint. And it was just a perfect fit for this weekend. So it's basically directly addressed to music. Look Down, Harmonious Saint, he's basically talking to the patron saint of music, talking about the power of music, how it works. It charms the soul, it delights the ear, all these things that you'll hear about. So it's going to start with a recitative, and then we launch into an aria about the delights of music. This is Look Down, Harmonious Saint by George Frederick Handel.
Don't want to check this out.
We're using Baroque instruments, so appropriate for the piece. These are replicated instruments. It would have been set up exactly as though it was 1700.
We were going to do it with harpsichord for reasons we don't need to get into. We were unable to use the harpsichord tonight, so.
I creates, stern rage destroys, and molds at will each stubborn heart. Touch every
So excited to share this evening with each of you. We meet people over the course of our lives that profoundly change the direction which we are going, or the way you understood the world. Yehuda was that for me. At a time when I had some success, I had a lot of love, I had a lot of passion for the cello, but there were some things, some rocks that had never been lifted up, and I didn't know to look for things. And I remember our first lesson. I was at the Aspen Music Festival in 1995, and we were working on Johann Sebastian Bach. And we chose the E-flat suite that particular summer. And I remember going home from that thinking, I have never played this music before. None of the Bach suites. I was just convinced that everything I thought was Bach was just wrong at that point. And not because he said I was wrong, because he showed me there was more. And so Yehuda has been an inspiration for me. We've maintained connection. Since those years, I ended up a year later auditioning at graduate school at the University of Cincinnati and joining him there, along with Dianna. And we just had the best time. I would say that our lessons were joyous affairs. And both of us like to poke the other one. Well, what if we did this? Well, what if you did that? Well, what if you did this? And it's marvelous. I think music offers the opportunity for endless amounts of creativity, and I think the more you know about it and the more you respect the score, the more freedom and creativity you have to do that. I think it also, at that level, shows us the very best of what human beings are capable, and we sorely need that right now in the world. We're capable of so much good, and I think in the best music we see that. So I hope tonight we're inviting you to explore some scores deeply and to think deeply about them. So, Yehuda, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, would you welcome Yehuda Hanani?
Thanks for this warm welcome. I was here 11 years ago, and I'm very happy to see Erik again. As whimsical and as inquisitive and as fabulous as he was then, just 11 years ago. And Dianna said, thanks.
I'm not as whimsical, though.
So, long ago, I was all of 12 or 13 maybe, I attended a summer chamber music camp of some sort, and one of the coaches was quite an old man. He had been the very first founder of the Budapest Quartet. So, his name was Emil Hauser, I still remember his name. We called him Uncle Emil in the old European fashion, you know. And one day before the coaching started, he sat at the piano and with a special smile on his face, with one finger, very slowly playing. We looking at us all as if he was doing some magic. Oh. We were kids. We looked at each other and we thought, the old man lost it. He's gone. It took me years to understand what he was trying to tell us. He was saying, kids, these 7 notes contain my whole life experience. This is my language. All of the dozens of pieces I played with the Budapest Quartets all over the world, they're all here, hiding in these few notes. And I wish I could see him again now that I'm maybe even older than he was then, and give him a hug and say, Uncle Emil, I'm with you. I understand fully what you were trying to tell us. So what we're going to do this weekend is really look at this relationship between spoken word, language, and music, and how music at a certain point becomes independent and becomes its own language. So we'll start with the relationship between words, speech, and music when they are still connected. Vocal music, the wonderful piece that you just heard. The words, the text, really dictates to the composer how to write. Not the other way. So, take a simple example. Bernstein, West Side Story. You all know it. Tonight, tonight, this rhythm, Bernstein did not invent it. It comes from the word, ta-da, ta-da, and then he writes the music. The entire song is based on this interval and this rhythm. If it were tomorrow, tomorrow, there'll be no more sorrow, you have a waltz, chop, chop, such a totally different rhythm. So you have a case, a very clear case of how a word dictates a song. Schumann writes an amazing cycle based on Heinrich Heine's 16 poems by Heine about a poet's love, dichte Liebe. There's a very smooth, flowing line there. I'm embarrassed to sing in front of you. Where is Jon? If you left out, I feel a little better now. Okay, please forgive me.
Go for it, go for it.
So, im wunderschönen Monat Mai, in the beautiful, wondrous month of May, when all the flowers opened up and love was awakened in my heart. This is the opening line. Poet's love. It won't work in English. In the beautiful and wonderful month of May, it doesn't work. Schumann is taking this beautiful, flowing, smooth sentence with the cadence going down gently, and he writes this, the only way to do it is to sing it in English. Can you imagine a Mozart opera sung in Japanese? Or Russian? It's out of the question. So all this music is really inspired and is in a way dictated to by the text. Take another example, it's very different. American Figaro. You know the story. It's a very spicy story. The count, rather stupid count, is plotting two of his people at his service, at the service, Susanna and Figaro, who is both at the service of the palace. Figaro is a hair cutter, she is the maid. They're getting married, and the count is plotting to enact the old medieval tradition, custom, of having the right of the first night, which means that every young couple that gets married in his domain, he gets the first night with a girl. Pretty disgusting, isn't it? But this was it in Europe. So, the whole opera starts there, and you can see how those two are really foiling his plan. They're making him look stupid, they make him apologize at the end. The whole opera is about, look how idiotic this guy is. So Figaro sings very early in the opera. Se vuol volare, signor continuo. If you want to dance, my little count, continuo, I will play the music. So look at these equal, even syllables. Se vuol ballare, signor continuo. It's exactly what Mozart is writing. Se vuol ballare, signor continuo. Se vuol ballare, signor continuo. The guy who's responsible for this beautiful rhythm, for this beautiful music, is a partner of Mozart. You know who he is? I will understand because I want to make sure I remember. Lorenzo da Ponte. Lorenzo da Ponte grew up in Venice, in the Jewish ghetto of Venice. Very colorful, very spicy character. grew up there, became a Catholic priest, was on the wrong political side of initial life, had to flee, went to Vienna, was introduced to Mozart, the rest is history. He gave Mozart 2 librettos, one for Mary de Figaro, one for Così fan tutti, 2 major historical, legendary operas, and then he emigrated to America, lived in New York and opened a tea shop. You can imagine this guy was responsible for Mozart's operas. He's selling tea in Manhattan. And he's telling everybody, I'm responsible for Mozart's operas. Till the end of his life. Then he became the first professor of Italian at Columbia University. But until the end of his life, he insisted the success of these 2 operas are because of me. I gave Mozart the text, I gave him the rhythm, I gave him the cadences, and he was not entirely wrong. That's the point, he was not entirely wrong. It's a collaboration, and we forget about the libretti standing. It's not fair. So you have words here that are really serving music as handmaiden, or they're at the service of great music, but they're very important to the music. Gregorian chant dictated a lot of the great music of the Middle Ages and Renaissance. I'm sure you know quite a few of those pieces. They follow the text. One of the reasons that composers were very fond of the word Alleluia, apart from the fact that in Hebrew it means praise the Lord, is that you have this A-E-U-A, Alleluia, and they're all open vowels. You can hang on to them forever. If you think Erik, you're stuck. You're stuck on the K. You cannot continue. So you have here 4 open vowels, and you can go on improvising. And you have this done by great composers, enjoying this amazing freedom that 4 open vowels can give them. So that's another reason why you hear so many Alleluias in liturgical music. It's part the liturgy, it's part the convenience, the opportunity that it gives composers to work with. Even when it becomes more independent music, it still maintains the quality and the attributes of spoken language. There was a whole school in Russia. They call themselves the realist school. Modest Mussorgsky. You know the name? Mussorgsky? He was a member of this group. He was obsessed with speech-derived music. And that's what he writes a friend of his in a letter. Here is what I would like, that my music should be an artistic reproduction of human speech in all its subtle shadings, as the outward manifestation of thoughts and feelings. Another great Russian composer is Rimsky-Korsakov, one of them, Scheherazade, is writing. He's a member of the same group, same way of thinking. Whatever is being said, in my mind, the musical embodiment of that speech takes place. A beautiful example of this, the relationship, the dependency between music and speech, is the Hungarian language and Hungarian music. You know, the Hungarian is a distinction, right? Having most of the words have their accent on the beginning, the first syllable of the word. So you don't speak Hungarian, you speak Hungarian. Tada, iga, tada. You can hear 2 people speaking Hungarian from a distance. You don't hear the words, you know they're speaking Hungarian. Just like the accent and by the intonation. A good composer, a great composer who actually uses this a lot is Bartok. And here's just a little example from his Rhapsody, which he wrote for Joseph Szigeti, a great Hungarian violinist. And it was such a success that he rewrote it for cello and piano, and then further orchestrated it for violin and orchestra. I just play one phrase to show you what he's doing with this ala, ala, ala. Hungarian music based on the Hungarian speech. Brahms, when he gets into a gypsy mood and he wants to write gypsy Hungarian music, he writes this slow movement of his piano trio. Do you remember the piano?
Oh, I don't know.
It's okay, it doesn't matter. Here it goes. Where do we go from here? Janacek. Anybody play any music by Janacek in the room? He used to sit in coffee houses, coffee shops, and write down the patterns of speech of people that he heard, just common folks, and then use them as material in his music, just the way Olivier Messiaen would walk in the forest and write down bird calls, use them as themes for his music. Schoenberg, in his amazing imagination, took music and speech and created a whole new form. He called it Sprechstunde, speaking and singing almost undistinguishable from one another, indistinguishable. So there's one masterpiece he wrote, and I really recommend for your general music course, either to hear it or even to play it. It's for voice and a very small group of players. It's called Pierrot Lunaire, the moonstruck Pierrot, very zany poetry, and the music is, I cannot imitate it, it's special notation that combines speech with directional pitches, going up and down, and it's hauntingly beautiful. If you ever ask your teacher to allow you to study Pierrot Lunaire, it will change the whole way you think about music. It's an amazing, innovative piece of work. So what did music take from speech once it became independent, once it discarded speech? We have repetition. You want to insist on something, right? You repeat. Shall I tell you?
Oh, I can do it, yes.
Beethoven Third Piano Concerto, the beginning.
Sorry, I actually had it right.
Beethoven imposes. The rest. Okay. Pom, 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 pom. That's Beethoven telling you, it's my way or no way. And he loved to do that. It's affirmation, right? Repetition can also be like a mantra. like the endless repetition in a Persian carpet or Indian ceramic, right? The same little delicate patterns that repeat endlessly. And that's what the minimalist is. Minimalist music is about repetition. You know the game Knock Knock out there? Can you play it? Knock Knock.
Who's there?
Knock Knock.
Who's there?
Knock Knock.
Who's there?
Knock Knock.
Who's there?
Philip Glass. Another thing that music took from speech is direction. And this is very basic. Going up represents hope, energy, elation, exuberance, optimism, up. Down, depression, decay, collapse, death. You say, I'm down today. Use it in speech. Things are going up. Things are looking up. We don't even think about it, but we are really giving a direction to abstract or to facts or to events, right? We've been trained, we've been conditioned from way back, centuries before Christianity, that the gods are above the clouds on Mount Olympus, and Hades, hell, is down, below the earth, somewhere very deep down there. So, when music moves up, it's always uplifting. I'm using the word uplifting, and the reverse is true too, vice versa. Schumann, there's another little story here. Schumann moved to the home of his teacher. It was customary in those days. Teachers took boarders, students moved in with them. So Schumann moves into the home of Mr. Wieck, who is this piano teacher. Mr. Wieck happens to have a child wonder who is 11 years old at the time. Her name is Clara, and she is a true genius. She played the piano before she could talk. And while she's a child, Schumann plays games with her and they're having fun. And then, by age 16, she becomes an amazing, exciting, irresistible young woman. They fall in love madly. They want to get married. And Mr. Wieck, whose daughter by then is concertizing all over Europe, and she's a big superstar, will have nothing to do with it. You know, I have to, in all honesty, if I had a daughter, a 16-year-old daughter, who wanted to marry a person who was manic depressive, unemployable, unpredictable, suicidal, I would also be very, very much against it. So we cannot exactly blame him, but that's the case. And they sue him. They sue her father, and they win the case, and they get married. And Schumann is beside himself. He is absolutely bursting with joy. And this period of 2 years or so are the most productive most productive years of his creative life. And he writes some unbelievable music, including a piano quintet, a gift for his young bride, which begins with 2 leaps upward. And you can listen to that. Nothing will stop him now. He's so filled with joy. And then the opening theme, the second theme of this movement, this movement is 3 spiraling sequences going up. It's actually a dialogue. There's a dialogue between the viola and the cello, right? The cello goes. Same phrase, just going upward, upward. Can you think of other metaphors that represent optimism, pessimism, and direction? Sunrise, sunset. We all know what it symbolizes, right? Then we have sigh, which music took from speech or human voice, right? Sigh is a descending second. Oh, right? And we have it all over the repertoire. Right? We find it all over. It always represents a painful sigh. And if you add to it the appoggiatura, then it becomes even more poignant, right? You know anybody who sighs upward? No way, no way. But in a baseball game, when thousands of people are sitting in the stadium and something interesting happens in the field, what do you hear? Oh, right? Don't tell me you heard it. It's exciting. So we have some examples of music that goes up. How about music that goes down? Tchaikovsky, poor Piotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, he was a master of melancholy. He didn't have a happy life. Throughout his life he had to hide his true identity, ended up committing suicide, and most of his beautiful music points down. The Pathetic Symphony, his last symphony, right? Very sad. Eugene Onegin, his opera, the famous Aria by Lenski. Lenski was challenged to a duel, and he shows up in the forest at the appointed place. The other company has not arrived yet. He knows that he will not come alive out of this duel. And he sits on a log and he sings, almost the same motif, it's just the same thing. Or Fourth Symphony is nothing. Think about it. But on those occasions, when he escapes his reality, usually into fantasy, into Swan's Lake, into this world of make-believe, you hear incredible, full of joy, going up and up and up and up, and then bursting in a laugh, into a laugh. Here's an example, back to back. Chromaticism. Going up into a religious kind of ecstasy, and the reverse, going down straight into hell. And I mean it literally. So this is, I'll start in the middle, the first prelude of Bach's Suite. into the gates of heaven. The reverse is an opera you all know very well. This woman introduces herself at the very beginning of the opera. She doesn't have to use words. She's speaking about love. L'amour. We all know what she really represents. She is trouble. She has bad news. She's going to catch this poor Don Jose. She comes out and she works in a cigarette factory. And the girls come out, the young women come out for break, and they all smoke, of course. And she sings this song where you know, if she catches him, he's finished. And it's just this descending harmonic like straight to heaven. Isn't it incredible how Bizet understood this? Wonderful. Thank you, Diana. By the way, this rhythm is habanera. You know, this rhythm. It's a dance form from Havana, Cuba. And it's called habanera. So, where do we continue from here? Yeah, so we talked about up, we talked about down. Now, most music is well balanced. Great phrases in classical repertoire will have a comfortable sense of equilibrium between well up, well down, and just basic examples. La 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 la. La, 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 la. A child will be comforted when he hears this little tune. Everything is in order. It is an up, there's a little tension, and there's a resolution going down. Perfect. And you have the same thing in recognize this piece? Moulds. Basically the same principle. We call it the pyramidal structure for a good reason. And you see it in art all over. Thousands of paintings are constructed in a pyramidal structure because it gives us a sense of completion, order, organization. Otherwise it's lopsided, it's unfinished. Give me some examples of pyramidal phrases. It's all over the repertoire. Beethoven violin concerto. Schubert does something amazing in his unfinished symphony. He rolls the first forward, the phrase, and then it rolls upon itself backwards, and gives you the same sense of completion. Second theme of Schubert's unfinished symphony. So you have the two elements, right? Are you with me? Forward, backward. It's in a sense also the pyramidal. What do you call it in speech when a word can be spelled both ways? Algebra. This is a musical algebra. You can come up with more examples?
Mr. PC, John Coltrane.
Is that the tune?
Oh, goodness sake. The Archdukes in trio. The scherzo. pyramidal structure, right? I wrote down a few, but as long as I'm making the point, that's enough there. Let's talk about another very interesting interval that comes straight from children's plays. And it's true for all of Europe, America, Canada, what we call the West. I'm not sure about Korea and Japan and China, but the descending third, children use it all over to tease. Oh yeah, Harry, party, you were not invited. All thirds. It's raining, it's pouring, the old man is snoring, da-da-da, couldn't get up in the morning. All thirds, descending thirds. When your mother calls you back home for dinner, when you're playing on the sidewalk, what interval does she use? Eric! Eric! Third. If she said, Eric! It needs this interval, yeah? And Prokofiev knew it. So in his music, he uses it whenever he loved childhood scenes. He was all over the place with children. Peter and the Wolf, and in his cello sonata, the middle movement is children at play. And the theme is la la la, la la la, la 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 la. Children play. Wonderful how it was transferred into classical, great classical music. What else can we see about the relationship between words and music? We are coming now to serious stuff. The reverse of this interval, in an ascending third, he is asking a question. He asks a question in the third going up. I have two beautiful examples, and Erik was going to help me with two pieces of music.
Do you want to hear the snippet of song and then we can lower the screen?
Maybe we can do that, and I'll tell the story meanwhile. So, Mendelssohn is 18, and he's falling in love for the first time. And he meets this girl in the garden, in the park, and he writes a poem, and he composes a song to go with the poem. And the poem begins, is this love? Is this love? Is it true? Is it possible that you were there standing by the arbor in the park with the woods surrounding you? And Jon was kind enough to actually sing the song. Just the one phrase, listen to those two questions. Is it so? Is it love? Ist das wahr? Ist das wahr? Dass du stets dort in dem Laubgang. Thank you so much. And then, he takes this song, the entire song, and he incorporates it into his second,
Screen down.
into his second string quartet. And the string quartet begins with these two questions. Listen to those rising thirds at the beginning of the piece. We're not going to play the whole piece, but at the very end, he actually introduces the entire song. So it begins with the questions at the beginning, and at the last minute we hear the whole song. We'll just listen to the questions. He puts, can you raise it from there? Here's the song. Here's the song. He actually gives us the original song, the voice and the piano part. So every quartet member knows that's what the Frage means question. And here is the music. So let's listen to it until the end of the question. Music takes over when words stop. And he meant it. And it transfers the emotion of being in love for the first time into the string quartet. So that's one example. The other one is much more serious. You know the story of Beethoven, I don't have to tell you, of course. He writes his last quartet, opus 135. He does not hear a note of it. He is as deaf as a donor. What's the expression?
Dormant? Yeah, deaf.
The world is shut down. He does not hear anymore any everyday sonorities, nothing. He is living in a world of silence, except he can continue writing sublime music, unlike painters. Blind painters cannot paint. Deaf composers, because of the language, can continue writing. And he writes, so he toys, I shouldn't use the word toy, but he toys with suicide. He doesn't want to continue this way. He says, a man who should have the best ear among everybody else, and the finest, is the one who is inflicted by deafness. And then he decides no. And he writes in his last quartet, before the last movement, he writes, the schwer gefasste Entschluss, the difficult, calm resolution. I'll keep going. And the opening of the quartet, he tells the musicians what the theme is, and the theme is the question. Moses on, you see that? A little bit like Mendelssohn. Must it sign? Must it be? It repeats twice, and then he inverts it. And he starts, es muss sein, the same music, upside down, yes, it must be. It gives me shivers when I listen to this quartet playing, because this is when he decided to go on living under those impossible conditions and continue writing. And it's all in the music, and he tells the musicians what the words are. There are some cynical colleagues who say, oh, never mind all these words. He's saying, must it be, because he just received his laundry bill and it's too big. Someone, that's not fair. He's not right in his string quartets about a laundry bill. This is a serious business. So let's listen to this opening of the quartet. Listen to the question, listen to the inversion of the question. Yes, it must be. Can you hear the inversion? The same three notes? Da, 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 da. There you have Ludwig saying, I'll prevail. I'll continue. It's incredible what music, how music goes beyond sound and actually it becomes language. Tells us all these stories I told you now, the words are there in music. I'd like to conclude by one piece of music. We will not play the whole piece. The whole piece takes about 35 minutes. It's a piece that is obsessed with asking the big question.
Kevin, projector.
We can lift the... So remember, was an amazing organist, a wonderful composer. This is probably one or two greatest pieces. It's his violin sonata, which is played by other instruments because it's so tempting to play it. And it is obsessed with insisting and begging and praying for an answer to the big question. And what you can put in big question whatever you want. What is it all about? Why are we here? What's the purpose? What is life for? You can put whatever word. Music does it better. It just asks the big question. And the question is, of course, the rising third. And it was the sonata was a birthday gift for Isai, a great violinist, Belgian violinist. And it has 4 movements. Isai read so much into it for Isai. The first movement was birth. The second movement was life, with all its struggle and conflicts and difficulties and tensions. The third was death. And the fourth was, again, whatever you want to call it, beyond. That's what Isai saw in this amazing piece. And each movement asks the same question in different ways. Thus, the rising third. Listen to these thirds throughout. We'll just play little snippets from each movement just to give you an idea what goes on there. Second movement is full of anxiety and anger almost, and aggressive request or insistence on, I want this answer, I need the answer, give me the answer. Second movement is very tragic because give up. We tried, we begged, we insisted, we didn't get the answer. So now we're remembering those years when we tried to get the answer, but we never got it. Towards the end of the movement, just long years when we were insisting on getting the answer, but we never get it. Zen fashion, when you don't hope to get it anywhere, by grace, the answer comes. The answer is saying, I have been in your question all this time. I was there. Listen to this. Remember the question? Here it is again. The answer is isn't there something? You spent your life looking for it and it was there all the time. You know, there was a great woman in France. Her name was Gertrude Stein. She was a friend of all Picasso and Cocteau, all the great artists, playwrights and painters. On her deathbed, they all surrounded her. And they said, Gertrude, what is the answer? And she said, what's the question? You grapple with a question long enough, the answer is there. There is an American classic children's story about it. Two kids, brother and sister, who are going in search of the bluebird of happiness. Have you read this book? And they go on all sorts of adventures all over the place. And they come back home. And the next morning, there's a bluebird in the backyard. I'll leave you with that, just as something to think about. Thanks.
Scripts are just guidelines. Let's take 5 minutes, okay? Lights up, and I'd really like to start the next thing right on the half hour. So if you need to leave and come back, and then we'll start. The next 3 things, I promise, are long, as long. But wonderful. Yeah, that was 30. Right, yeah. Oh,
I don't think that would be
That's what
right, it's not hard to
singing to the young man. But I can thank you. Like I said, tomorrow,
instruments in your feet. So now you can share your screen.
That was wonderful. I was listening the whole time.
Oh my God.
I want to yield my time to let you talk for another hour.
Eric is an amazing organizer.
Yes, he is. Yeah, it looks great. I wish I could be there.
Okay, so I'm going to chair. Kevin, let's sound out and try and play a YouTube video and see what your
My audio coming through.
I was thinking of the last
Okay, that sounds coming through all right.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. All right. Great.
Is that working?
Yes. Okay, so our next guest, everybody, this is Carlton Monroe, Dr. Carlton Monroe. He's the director of the Bach Ensemble of St. Thomas in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Carlton and I became, I would say he was my best friend in Cincinnati. We passed in the hall one day, and I heard him telling one of his friends, Carlton, can you hear me?
Yeah, I remember the story.
Yeah, so I was coming out of song literature with a class that I was taking because he was renowned as the best professor at CCM, and Carlton was saying, yeah, so we'll be playing basketball tonight, and I was like, what? And we played basketball every Monday night for the next, 5 or 6 years. We golfed together. I've been back to Cincinnati to join his Bach ensemble several times. He's been here in Minot. I think he was here in like 2016 or 2017. Anyway, he's one of the projects that St. Thomas is doing is they're trying to perform all of the cantatas. All of the Bach cantatas. And the cantatas were service music. Right. So anyway, Dr. Carlton Monroe, could you welcome him?
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. Eric, I don't know if you wanted to turn me around again on the laptop around. It's a little bit concerning to speak to you. There, okay, hi everyone. That's much better. I'm delighted to join you. I was watching from the start of the evening. It's been wonderful. I would really like to yield my time and let Yehuda talk for another hour, because that was incredible. Eric asked me to come on and talk a little bit about Bach's cantatas, and specifically his use of the German chorale, because I think it's a pretty interesting thing to think about in light of the theme of this weekend's discussions. And I sat down and started working out what I thought I wanted to share, and looked at it and said, well, this is about a 2-hour lecture. So I quickly said, well, we need to squeeze this into 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an overview and some ideas that I think are pretty interesting when we think about this specific music. And I actually, 48 hours ago, I submitted a title to Eric for my talk. It was Bach Chorale's The Voice of the Past. 24 hours ago, I had an epiphany and totally changed the title because I heard a podcast by, you may know, the Canadian psychologist and author Steven Pinker. And he has just published a new book called Common Knowledge. And I listened to this interview with him and I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what makes the discussion of Bach's chorales and the use in cantatas so interesting. So what is common knowledge? It's more than just sort of shared history. Common knowledge, the way Pinker describes it, is you know something, and I know that same something, and you know that I know that something, and I know that you know it, and you know that I know that you know, and on and on and on and on ad infinitum. This is his description of what common knowledge is. Obviously, this is a kind of a cultural phenomenon, a societal phenomenon. It's what binds communities together. And it's more than just, this is, it's a shared knowledge of history, of texts, of ideas that are all wrapped up together. And good examples of this would be like mythology. You might have a certain mythology that your community or culture or society shares, and you can sort of talk about that in a way without fully explaining all of the background. The longer lasting or wider spread the common knowledge, I think the greater and deeper the impact that it has. That means that if there is something that we share, some knowledge we share in common that lasts a generation, that can have more artistic impact on our lives than a fad that may only last 3 months. Now, this is all maybe not very clear-cut. I want to get some clear-cut examples of what I'm talking about. But I specifically want to talk a little bit about the German chorale and what it meant to Bach and his congregation, because we may share some of the common knowledge of the chorale tradition, but we don't share all of it, and I think there's a lot of place setting that we need to do to fully understand it. A chorale, just so we know what we're talking about a hymn tune and a text together. The chorale was the theological and emotional foundation of Bach's sacred music. He wrote knowing that his congregation knew the melodies. Not only did they know the chorale melodies, they would know the text. They would associate those melodies with the text, which, if you think about it, allows for an extra level of communication possible in music. It's not just that a musical gesture might express emotion, but it's that a musical use of a chorale tune might actually add a secondary text that is left unsung or unspoken or unsung in a piece of music, thus creating an even more complex arrangement in the piece. There were times where Bach would use chorales to support the sung text that you would hear. There are also times where he might use a chorale to contrast with the sung text. And again, that secondary text was never spoken. It was all simply implied through this idea of common knowledge. There are a couple of things also about the chorale that are notable. Number one, it was rooted in the Reformation vision of congregational singing in the vernacular. This was really musically revolutionary to have a Christian congregation singing music that was in the vernacular language and not in Latin. We shouldn't underestimate the psychological power of that experience. Chorales were generally very simple melodies. They were supposed to be memorable, easily sung. A lot of them were derived from folk songs, or even some drinking songs became sacred chorales. There are multiple ways that Bach would use these in his music. I want to focus really on one usage. The one that I'm not focusing on would be the explicit presentation of a chorale in four-part harmony. This happens in the Passions that Bach wrote. It happens at the end of almost every sacred cantata he wrote. And in this case, they were used as a congregational reflection point, sort of a moment to bring the listener directly into the music with a melody, a tune, a text that they would be familiar with. Another way that he would utilize them would be just creating very florid arrangements of chorales. The chorale would still be presented straightforward, but you might have a more florid accompaniment with it. A great, very famous example of this is the bane of every wedding musician, "It is the joy of man's desiring." Right? Da da dee da 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 dee da da da. Right. This is a florid accompaniment to a chorale tune. But the ones that I want to talk about tonight I find very unique because they are instrumental uses of chorale tunes in cantatas. And as I was saying before, what I think is interesting about these is that the use of them implies not only language without being sung, but Bach's congregation would associate these tunes with certain seasons of the liturgical year. So the use of the tune would imply a liturgical season as well. And then finally, there would be some level of emotional responses attached to that liturgical season. So for example, Advent was a season of anticipation. So the playing of an instrumental Advent tune would trigger in his listener a sense of that anticipation. Easter is a joyful season. Lent is a penitent season. So the use of those tunes would add that layer of affect to the composition. So let's get into some actual examples, because that's going to be a lot more interesting. The first example, and I'm going to try to share my screen right now, and if this goes the way most PowerPoints do, it'll fail miserably. Let's see. All right, so we're going to start right here. And, okay, so the first example that I want to use, and I'm going to use this screen first, and then we're going to play the example. This is Cantata 161, Von du süße Todesstunde, which means Come Sweet Hour of Death. It's an alto aria. It's the first movement of this cantata. And this is the text, the German text and the English translation. The text that is in the light font is the text that is actually sung by the alto soloist. The text that is in the dark text is the text that will be played in the example on a single organ stop. So this text, that secondary text, is not actually sung. It's Herzlich tut mich verlangen. That's the Passion chorale, which is one of the most famous chorales, and we'll come back to this chorale at another point in this chat. So the listener would hear the first set of text, but then would have the chorale played of the dark text. And not only would this remind them potentially of this German text, but because it was associated with the Passion, the liturgical moment of the Passion, it would be an automatic association with Christ's death in this case. And so what happens to the listener is you have the singer singing about welcoming death, frankly, and but that is going to be paralleled by the reminder, the Christian sense. I'm not trying to be a preacher here, but I'm just trying to explain this. The Christian sense that it was Christ's passion that made the sweet death possible, if you can understand that relationship. So in this example, you'll hear the alto soloist start, and then the video will cut at one point to the organist playing that chorale tune, which you may recognize. All right, Eric, you want to play that one? Of course, the miracle of Bach is that he can take this text exercise and make it sound as beautiful as that. The next example that I want to share with you is Cantata 62, Nun komm der Heiden heilet. This is an Advent cantata. Nun komm der Heiden heilet means Savior of the nations come. And this music example is the tune, that chorale tune. Ba, 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 ba. In this cantata that we're going to play, I'm going to play just a little bit of the very opening chorus. This is an example where Bach really creates a dramatic picture. I mentioned before that Advent was a season of anticipation, and I think the way Bach chooses to use the chorale in this example really heightens that. The first thing he does is very unusual. So you'll hear the orchestra start, and it'll be the treble instruments of the orchestra, and the continuo is not playing at the very beginning. And when the continuo part, so the bass, the cello, the organ, harpsichord, the bassoon, when they enter, instead of a very ordinary Baroque continuo line where they sort of they lay down the bass track for the other instruments, they come in with the chorale tune in very long, dramatic notes. So you'll hear this melody expanding. I jokingly call this Bach's superhero music. Maybe when you listen, you'll understand, but it sounds like he could have written the music for a Marvel movie. So you'll hear this in the continuo first, and then the orchestra will play more of that filler material. And right before the choir comes in, you'll hear a second statement of the chorale, this time in the oboes, wailing at the top of their range. So you have the continuo playing the theme at the bottom of the range, the oboes at the top of the range, and then the lower three voices of the choir, alto, tenor, bass, will come in with a imitative section, and it's a theme that's very clearly based on this chorale, but it dissipates quickly. It's not a clear statement of the chorale. And finally, at the end of this opening choral statement, you will hear the sopranos enter with the oboes in unison, playing the first full statement with text of this opening line, Nun kommt der Heiden Heiland. And I think the way Bach does this with the music is a way of emphasizing the anticipation of the piece and the anticipation of the Advent season. It's very exciting and exhilarating music. Let's go ahead and hear it. I hope Eric turned that up really loud for you all. Man, that's some great music. All right, the last example I want to share with you is going back to the Passion Chorale. That was the first example as well. And I want to talk about its use in the St. Matthew Passion. This may be the most famous or well-known chorales of J.S. Bach. And this is the tune. But in particular, I want you to pay attention to the very, first phrase and the descending line. This Erbarmedi, this aria was a reflective aria sung right in the moment of the Passion story when Peter has denied Jesus 3 times. And that narrative. At that moment, a cock crows, and Peter is reminded that Jesus foretold that he would deny him, and Peter went out and wept bitterly. And this aria is the weeping. Erbarmedi means have mercy. So So there are a couple of interesting things about Bach's use of this in St. Matthew, one of which I think had to have been very personal, because it's not something that would have been conveyed in a oral experience of the piece. And that is, this chorale appears as a straightforward chorale sung by the choir 5 times in the Passion. And the first time it appears, the key signature is 4 sharps. The second time it appears, the key signature is 3 flats. The next time is 2 sharps. The fourth time is 1 flat. And the final time that it appears is the moment immediately after Jesus dies on the cross, and it appears in A minor with no sharps and no flats. So Bach has sort of imprinted this little countdown into the score, and the only people that would be aware of it would be someone actually looking at the score. It's not obviously something that you would hear. And that tells me that this was an especially personal response to this particular chorale tune. So I want to show you now the continuo part to the beginning of Erbarmedi. And just take a look again at this first measure of this chorale tune. And then if I shift to the continuo part of Erbarmedi, you will see that the bass line is that same melodic tune, all the way to the second beat of the second bar when it starts to move in thirds. And this idea, this thematic idea happens, you see in bar 3, it's similar. It's not quite the same, but again, it's similar, this descending motion. And it's littered throughout the aria. And so what Bach is doing here in a very subtle way, much more subtle than the other examples I showed you, was sort of, in a way, piling on Peter a little bit, because it's linking this cry for mercy directly to Christ's passion and death. It's a very powerful moment in the piece, but when you listen to it with the knowledge of where this bass line is derived from, it becomes even more stunning. Why don't we listen to a little bit of this one? I'm going to end my remarks there. I think maybe what I'd like to close with is going back to this idea of common knowledge, because that's a really fascinating phenomenon. And I think some of this remains common knowledge, but the truth is that we would never fully be able to experience Bach's sacred music the way his congregation would have been able to experience it. We can only approximate it in so many ways. And I find it very interesting to think about where are the areas of common knowledge that we share today? What are the examples in art where we know that we can share this with another person and have a very similar reaction to it? So that's what I have. I hope you enjoyed that. that little look into Bach's chorale.
He's still here. One of the things that I hope's not lost on you, I mean, when I said what Yehuda meant to me, what I said is he helped me see stuff that was always there. I just didn't see it. What Carlson is saying is people are singing these songs, they're singing these chorales, they're listening to them, they just don't see it. One of my favorite things to talk about is watching sports, and it could be, if you understand football really, really well, you can see what the tackle and what the tight end and what the offensive lineman and the guard that's pulling and going this direction, you can see how it's orchestrated and it's beautiful. Or you can see it as a bunch of guys that just run into each other, fall down, and do it again for 3 hours. What I'm saying is that there is so much out there that's there. And you need to find your Yehuda.
Well, Erik asked me to share with you a presentation that I collaborated with the Bayo String Quartet at Dakota Chamber Music a couple summers ago. When they played Beethoven's Quartet Opus 132. Beethoven wrote 16 string quartets over the span of his entire career, and this is number 15. He wrote this in 1825, 2 years before he died. So again, he was completely deaf when he wrote this. And he was also quite ill when he wrote this particular quartet. He was suffering during the entire winter season of this year. He was suffering from an intestinal disease. And it was quite severe. He felt like he was going to actually die. And, but he didn't, he recovered. And so the slow movement of this particular string quartet, he wrote as a thanksgiving song to God for healing him. And so this is the beginning of that movement. It's marked molto adagio, but he writes in his own language here, Heiliger Dankgesang, which means a holy thanksgiving song. Eines Genessenen, which means of a convalescent, of someone who is recovering from an illness, on die Gottheit, or to the deity, or to God. And then he also adds in der Lyddischen Tonart, meaning that he's writing this in the Lydian mode, which is kind of a special little bit of trivia that he happens to be writing it in the Lydian mode. We can set that aside for a while. What's important, I think, is that again, it's a hymn, a song of thanksgiving to God for helping him be recovered from this illness. And when I listened to this for the first time, I was an undergraduate, and I was just spellbound. This was unlike any other slow movement I had ever heard of Beethoven. And I'm going to play for you just the beginning of it, which is on the screen. And I want you to notice how it's constructed. It's not what you might expect. Okay, could we have more volume as well? Okay. phrases. Now, how is this constructed? Well, you can see it's an alternation. We have a section in quarter notes, and then half notes. Quarter notes, half notes, etc. It happens 4 times. What's the difference? Well, the half notes are all happening at the same time, much like a what? Chorale. And how are the quarter note sections constructed? One voice at a time, right? And not only do the other voices come in one at a time, but they imitate exactly what the previous voice is playing. So that's called imitation. So in each case, the leading voice is imitated by the successive instruments. It starts from the top and goes down for the first 2 phrases. Here it starts from the cello and comes up, and the final one coming down. So what I'd like to share with you is the way that Beethoven was influenced by vocal pieces, because we're talking about chorales and singing and its influence in instrumental music. So when I saw this, I immediately thought of a particular Renaissance motet. And one of the most famous Renaissance motets of the 16th century is one written by Justest, French Renaissance composer. And he wrote this motet called Aria, and you'll see that it's constructed in the very same way. The soprano is for 4-part choir. Soprano introduces a statement, and then the alto imitates that, and it goes right down. It happens 4 times, just like the Beethoven. The idea of the sacred vocal music is appropriate for this Thanksgiving song to God. And then I thought, well, the other sections, the half-note sections, are obviously very much like a chorale. And so I thought, well, why don't I get my book of chorales by Bach out and see if perhaps I could see some chorale that was that would match. And so in a Bach chorale, the soprano line carries the melody. So I tried to find a chorale which had this melody. And in my handy-dandy book of chorales, there's 371 of them. So I made it to 93. And wouldn't you know, let's listen to it. Okay, different rhythm, different key, time signature, but it's the same notes. Now that's the only phrase. Beethoven doesn't quote the rest of the chorale. And who knows whether he really thought of this. And so I thought, well, let me look at the text. Maybe the text, if that has anything to do with Thanksgiving or being healed or anything. So I looked to see what Wach auf mein Herz meant. And here's an English translation of the first few verses. Awake my heart and sing to the creator of everything, to the giver of all that is good, to the righteous guardian of mankind. So someone's addressing the creator and being thankful for what's good. But the second verse is what struck me. This night, when the dark shadows had surrounded me completely, like maybe someone was having trouble with their health, Satan coveted what was mine, but God was my defense, or my rescuer. So I thought, I wonder if he might have been familiar with that. I also wanted to show you that this is the original chorale tune, which existed way before Bach harmonized it. This tune was printed in a book in 1653. Bum, 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 and then left out the passing tone. Bum, bum, bum. So that's the earliest found source of this chorale tune. But I thought that was fascinating. The only other thing I want to share with you is that I wondered if these imitative quarter note sections had anything to do with the chorale sections, or were they just nice churchy imitative stuff in between? Well, let's look at the 5 last notes of the chorale. The first verse, our first phrase. Bum, 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 bum. Do you see that anywhere in here? Right here. Bum, 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 bum. We're in the same notes. And again, down here in the cello. Bum, 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 bum. And then here. Bum, 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 bum. Sorry. Bum, 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 bum. So if, I'm trying to make the claim that if Beethoven was conscious of this chorale, maybe he was relating this to that phrase so that there's a unity between the quarter note sections and the half notes. But at the very least, I think it's clear to say that he was very much inspired by vocal music of 2 different centuries prior to when he lived. And I think that's fascinating. So that's what I wanted to share.
This will be the shortest of all of them, and I think it brings everything together. And it'll wrap it up very nicely. We're gonna play some of the Mendelssohn, the last movements of his piano trio. Okay, so Mendelssohn. We know his octet, we know he was prodigious, Midsummer Night's Dream. He lived a fairly short life for someone that was born with just about everything. Not all 11 and 12-year-olds have an orchestra hired to play their music, you know? And not everyone who is given such advantages takes full advantage of them, and I think Mendelssohn did. And he gave us an incredible richness of music that is not only well constructed and crafted, but is profound in depth and meaning. And I think when people lift the Mendelssohn rock in 500 years, they will still find that the art speaks, and it validates itself. So Mendelssohn, at this particular time, his family, and I'll try to make this as quick as possible, was a Jewish family. And anti-Semitism was a thing. And there was pressure to convert to Protestantism in Germany. And his family did so, took on the name Bartholdy, so Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy, and they were essentially practicing Protestants. What I wanted to show right now in this is we've been talking about the chorale, and Mendelssohn, for Mendelssohn, a Lutheran, a practicing Lutheran in Germany, the chorale was important. And you're going to hear a chorale in this piece. But he came from a long line of Jewish traditions which include music. Now, I can't say that the themes that we're about to present are that this is an authentic Jewish melody. But what I want to show you is that at this time, Mendelssohn is speaking to us and talking about the reconciliation of opposing viewpoints, and that those viewpoints can be brought together musically to coexist. In the same way that I wish we look around the world and see that just, why can't we get along? And he offers us this, 200 years ago. So we're going to play just a couple of excerpts, and I think you will see that this wild, folkish, wonderful, perhaps Jewish theme, mixed with the Lutheran doxology, makes for one of the best final movements in all of chamber music. Okay, so we get the introduction of the chorale idea, and yet dancing around this chorale is sort of a reimagining of that wonderful folk tune. So then he develops the folk tune in a classical sense of we all get to play with this idea. You'll hear it truncated into a 4-note version, but I wanted to play this next section just to show you how he goes from the chorale back into dancing around, and all of us get to have a conversation. So now I want to play, and we'll finish here. There's so much for you all to think about tonight, but just leave with this. Language, song, cultural traditions, they are preserved through, I love the idea of common knowledge. You think about sampling in hip-hop music and what that is. If you know the samples, it matters. It adds layers of meaning. If you are the fan of the same baseball team, you can speak a language. If you understand chorales, if you understand, you can speak this, it's beautiful. So this is the end, the way he ends this whole massive C minor trio, and just enjoy the way he weaves these two things together. There is a second theme which we didn't introduce. You'll hear. Yes. Yeah. Service at
I've forgotten about that. I know that.
So much information.
Yes. Next job. That was so good. I forgot about that. This was something I was like, oh, I know that one. Congratulations. I heard that. No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. But as soon as you were done, I was like, oh, that's excellent for now. So that was great. I love the word.
You are. So we met one day. Like the D minor.
Yeah, I know.
We worked for like 10 minutes a day. I remember you used to have something to say. I think, you know.
Follow them to figure it out. But at the very least, just
So I was hoping that.
it did like this. Vibrato. Yes. Like how they sing to thing.
Oh, where? Okay, yeah, Diana's from Montana.
Yeah. Oh, you guys.
Billings. I'm from Billings. Billings is the big city, right? But Diana's from a town that's 2 hours south. That was great. Yeah. Sorry that I wasn't able to come up with, like, I put out the feelers.